business is growing fast. The world changes quickly, and we have to be able to adapt and change with it. And agility is probably one of our core competencies that we have to be comfortable with. But I see this amazing path of being able to continue to grow and hopefully triple or quadruple in size and continue to be a great service provider to our doctors. We like to say, if we take great care of our doctors, then our doctors can take great care of our patients. And I don't even have to think about the economic side. I don't have to worry about the key performance indicators. I don't have to be maniacally focused on every last penny. I just have to make sure that we provide a great environment for our surgeon partners.
Welcome back to the Dental Economist Show with me, Mike Huffaker. Today, we are excited to welcome Dan Hosler, CEO and co-founder of Allied OMS. Allied OMS blends the autonomy of private dental practices with the efficiency of private equity to enhance operations and patient care in oral and maxillofacial surgery. With a robust background in healthcare investment and a visionary approach to dental practice management, Daniel's redefined how oral surgery practices thrive in a competitive industry. Welcome to the show, Dan. How are you doing today?
Mike, I'm doing well. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you very much for joining. So, Dan, you have a very distinguished career overseeing substantial equity transactions and now leading Allied OMS. Share a bit how your journey in healthcare investment began and what's kept you engaged in this sector for over a decade.
So it actually started with working in my dad's practice. My dad was a gastroenterologist in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And as a teenager, I just thought it was normal unpacking boxes and doing collections calls with patients and things like that. I thought I wanted to be a doctor, so I went to Rice, got a degree in biochemistry, but then stared down the med school application. And really one of those first questions that you would see is, why do you want to be a doctor? And I kind of froze. I said, gosh, I love business. I didn't want to be on the provider side. So from there, I pivoted and ended up going to business school. And I got hooked up with private equity. So middle market private equity pretty quickly from business school. And as I began doing partnerships in the physician practice management space, actually the very first one was a pediatric dentistry and orthodontics business in California. As I started to work on those partnerships, you realize that the doctors would have so many questions that they wanted to have help get answered. And private equity wasn't really providing those answers. It was more about get the deal done, grow, move on, sell. And so we thought about, what if we could come up with a different model? What if we could come up with something that was more instructive, call it knowledge sharing with the providers to teach them how to be better shareholders, how to be better business people in the businesses that we're working with. So that was the origin story of Dune-Glass Capital and how we came to create Allied OMS.
Now, you have some unique perspective, I would imagine, not only having founded your PE firm, but also directly managing the business with Allied OMS since it's been founded. You take a alternative to the traditional kind of private equity model, and you really emphasize doctor leadership and ownership. Can you talk about what advantages this model provides the practices that partner with you?
Yeah, so one of the biggest advantages we think is a better or more equitable sharing of the economics. So when we started this, a lot of the questions that doctors would ask would be, why can't I get the same multiple that private equity gets when they sell the platform? And so we talked about, how lenders, how equity investors are looking for diversification of risk. And that can only come from consolidation, having centralized services, having better handles on cash flow management, on taking costs out of the business and increasing efficiencies in the business. And so one of the things we said is, what if we could share that knowledge and in exchange for doing something about it, right? Having our doctor partners help us on that journey. If there was a way to share in more of those economics, we thought that would be a good win-win and really a better alignment of interests.
Yeah, and how many practices do you now have that are associated with Allied OMS?
Yeah, we just started 4 years and 1 month ago. So we just had our 4-year birthday celebration. And we're now up to 32 practices in 12 states. And it represents about 44 locations. So we do have a handful of groups that operate multiple locations. And I think the thing that gets us excited, we're very much growth oriented. So watching and helping doctors open satellite offices, really follow the lead of their key referral partners, those dentists and orthodontists and others in those markets, really help follow their lead in terms of being able to provide more access to care. It's been a really fun part of the journey.
Yeah. What is something that has been maybe a pleasant surprise for you along those 4 years? Maybe something that is better than expected, or provides for better prospects in the future, and maybe if you could also share something that's been more challenging than you anticipated it being when you first kind of set out on this journey 4 years ago.
Yeah, so I would say one of the things that we did as we created, we've trademarked this term doctor equity instead of private equity. So as we started this journey, so much of what we do is focused on delayed gratification, investing or reinvesting in yourself. And what's been a nice byproduct of that is our surgeons are by and large almost a decade younger than any of our competitors. And so it's become a self-selecting mechanism. We're getting those growth mindset, entrepreneurial, business-minded surgeons that are part of our platform really helping us grow. So that was, I'd love to say we designed that in the beginning, but it absolutely became sort of a reinforcing truth. So that's been a pleasant surprise. I think maybe something that continues to be a challenge, and probably one of the things that keeps me awake at night, is just cybersecurity, right? I don't think any of us envision just how complicated things would get. I'll give a good example. We had a phishing email attempt from a quote unquote Dropbox. It was titled, Andreessen Horowitz would like to contact you. And I thought, man, Andreessen Horowitz, man, we're moving up. And then my business partner's like, yeah, this is a really clever phishing attempt. So the cybersecurity side, I think, is an area that we have to continue to invest. We've got to invest in the education too, because, it's amazing. We have a new employee start, and within a week, right, a fake text message will come from Dan Hosler, CEO of Allied. Hey, I just got a new phone number. Can you go buy me a bunch of gift cards? I mean, just the speed with which some of this stuff happens. So that's definitely something that I think has gotten more complicated.
Yeah, when you get the email from the A16Z, you get a little excited that you've got Craig Andreessen Horowitz coming after you. But yeah, we get the same things. I was actually just speaking to the CEO of Dental Exchange, and we released a recent podcast with him, and one of the topics was about cybersecurity and what people can do to protect themselves, as now the dental industry has found itself, at least on the dental claim side, relatively single threaded. There's only a couple of providers doing all of the business. You've got Vine and now Dental Exchange that's doing, I think, roughly 80% of dental claims. And he was sharing that regarding the phishing emails, they actually send out these tests to their employees all the time. And if somebody fails one 3 times, they're no longer allowed to work at the company, which is a pretty defined line of, no, this is not okay. You go through trainings first and otherwise, but almost all of the different ransomware attacks and otherwise that we've been seeing happen as a result of those emails. They seem so innocuous, right? Or the text messages.
Yep.
When you guys are speaking to new doctors that are interested in partnering with you all, what are some of the questions that you think that they should be considering when they're seeking out a new capital partner to expand operations? I would imagine sometimes you're in competitive processes. How would you guide somebody that is looking to potentially work with yourself or others, and to really understand what's important to their business and make sure that they're making the right decision?
Yeah, one of the things we start with is trying to educate them about what does it mean to be an investor in private equity, because that's what these doctors and dentists are being asked, right? If you have any amount of reinvestment, you should be asking, and frankly, we feel you're entitled to hear the answer of how much debt is outstanding. What are the terms of the debt or interest rates of the debt? And these organizations can get big enough. How many different types of debt? We actually did a debt primer with our doctor partners about 2 years ago. We were really small then, but we said, hey, as we get bigger, we want you to know that debt is not a 4-letter word, right? It does serve a purpose, but you have to be smart about how you use it and the terms under which you do use it. So being able to share that knowledge with our doctors is really important. So we like to say, how much debt is outstanding? Are there multiple types? What are the terms? How many classes of stock are outstanding? Am I owning corporate stock, or is this kind of locally managed stock? What are my rights as a shareholder, or what are my rights to information? Are there opportunities to, if I'm so inclined, serve on an administrative committee or a finance committee so that I can be more heavily involved in the business? We have 7 different doctor-led committees inside of Allied OMS. They're each chaired by a doctor partner, and it's been fun because it lets them exercise those areas that they're most excited about and really have a strong voice in our business so that they're heavily involved in the direction that the business goes. They certainly have clinical autonomy. That's sacrosanct to me as the CEO co-founder. We're never going to talk about changing the clinical autonomy side. And frankly, we like them to continue to be very involved on the business side. So what does it mean? How can I tap into additional resources for recruiting, opening new offices, changing equipment, experimenting with new technologies as they become available? Each of those things can be exercised in a committee structure so that our doctors can continue to have a very firm voice in the direction of our business.
Do you think that type of transparency as it relates to the business and debt and otherwise is typical, and that's what the doctors will find when they're engaging with other private equity groups? Or do you find that that's relatively unique to yourself and something that is kind of like one of your core values of ensuring that you're educating any partner that comes to join your organization?
Yeah, I'm glad you used the word core values. Actually, we've got 3 core values we share with our doctors. We talk about making sure that our doctors know that our model provides better economic opportunity for them, number 1. Number 2, we talk about teaching them about how to be a private equity investor. And the third one is transparency, not just transparency into our business model, but transparency into the business model of how private equity firms function. And we think by exercising those core values, it really allows us to, have a better alignment of interest across all of our different shareholders, all of our providers. And it's a mixed bag. I wouldn't say that we're unique in our approach, but I do think that you've got a lot of different types of private equity firms. There's so many DSOs out there. And so you've got some really good actors. It's fun. I get to hang out with some of the CEOs and co-founders of other businesses. I'll give my props to Justin Puckett because he's been very kind in sharing some of his war stories over at MB2. And I really like the approach about how they think about how to partner with doctors. So I think they share some of those same things: transparency, providing great alignment of interests, making sure that there's great economics for their partners. So there are definitely some good actors out there, but it's key, right? It's incumbent as a doctor or dentist to ask those questions to make sure that you're picking the right partner.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, when you were looking to initially found Allied OMS and you're kind of looking at the landscape, there's plenty of different verticals in healthcare and just even within kind of the dental industry, multi-specialties. How did you land on oral surgery? And, how do you think about the, forward-looking potential of that specialty within kind of the broader dental landscape?
Yeah, I think when we were looking at oral surgery in particular, I'm a big fan and believer in a focused factory concept. So if we're going to do something, I want us to be the absolute best at it. I want us to have centers of excellence where we can provide cutting edge TMJ or extraction or implant centers. I want us to be the best at that area. And while there's a whole host of folks that can do many of the things that our oral surgeons can do, what we really liked was when it came to the end of the line, if a dentist got into a jam, there was something that wasn't working in a particular clinical case, it was the oral surgeon that got that final phone call. Hey, can you help me out? Or this isn't working the way I needed it to. Miss Jones is in pain. Is there anything you can do to help? We really like that terminal referral kind of component of oral surgery. And then we just thought about from a technology perspective, the rest of the world has implemented implant technologies decades sooner than we have, right? We've used things like root canals and dental appliances in a way that the rest of the world sort of bypassed, right? They said, well, wait a second, an implant can last really for the rest of your life or nearly for the rest of your life, especially when you use that as sort of the foundation for other dental appliances. And so we think there's great opportunities, especially as we think about maybe the R word, right? Recession possibly being around the corner. If you crack that root canal or the crown pops off or you're in dental pain, it just doesn't seem like there's many areas that have that sort of acute episodic nature of care. When it happens, you need it to get fixed right away. And I'm now an example. I'm a patient at Allied OMS. Family dinner on a Sunday. I popped into a carrot and I cracked a second molar. And I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this happened to me. I've got a little arthritis in my left knee. I still run quite a bit. It doesn't terribly bother me, but I haven't seen an orthopedic doctor in ever, right? But man, I cracked that tooth and I'm like, uh-oh, I got a problem. So the recession resiliency was something that was really of interest to us. And this goes back to 2020. We thought about what are the things that we really like about our platform and what do we want to continue to invest in as we grow in the future.
As a DSO, as a partner to doctor owners, what do you feel like is your obligation to driving value? Like where do you really look to focus your time and efforts and prioritize to ensure that the doctors that you're partnered with extract the maximum amount of value with this relationship?
Yeah, I think the implant contracts are definitely an area that we focus on quite a bit. But there's a number of I always like to start with the back office. We've got a great ops team headed up by my other co-founder, Ryan Graham, on the business side. And so when we think about consolidating accounting, payroll, time and attendance, just basic medical and dental supply procurement, credit card processing, there's a whole litany of things that we can focus on that are just the most commonly referenced items that our providers say, Dan, I didn't go to medical school. I didn't go to dental school to be this, to be the HR director, to be the IT director. So we try to make sure that we provide those services and make sure that we get them right 100% of the time. And then from there, right, by building trust in providing those services, it's really fun to have the doctors then come to us and say, hey, this is really helpful over here. Can you help me out in this other area as well? And so we wait for that chorus of requests to become sort of a loud voice. And then it also helps us direct where we invest more resources to keep providing that next layer of services to our doctors.
You had mentioned earlier that you have some committees that you have within the business that are formed with the doctor partners. Can you talk a little bit more about what those opportunities are, what the committee's functions fill within the organization, and how that offers some of the clinicians the opportunity to be more involved in the business?
So we've got a QAPI committee, a quality assurance process improvement, that's spearheaded by our chief medical officer, Dr. Jonathan Junt. We've got an administrative committee, which really serves as sort of a liaison between our practice admins at the practice level and more of the business team, sort of as championed by our doctor partners. There's an income growth committee. This is focused on kind of best in class, I'm going to call it business processes that help sort of streamline and make practices more efficient. We've got a de novo committee. We have a shareholder committee. I'm probably leaving a couple off the list, but basically the idea is as we get bigger, right, and the doctors ask for more of these types of services, then it creates sort of a nice shell of an organization that can ladder up to the senior management team and ladder all the way up to our doctor-controlled board of directors so that we can constantly have our finger on the pulse of the business. And this helps guide, again, where we can make those investments. And it's fun because we have a number of doctors that don't participate on these committees, and that's entirely okay. And we have some other doctors that are like, I love business. I love, talking about treatment plan coordination. I love talking about conversion rates. And this gives them an outlet to be able to exercise those passions. So we like to say you can be more than just a surgeon, right? You can be a surgeon and a business team member. And that's really appealing to a number of our surgeons.
Yeah, it's really great. And you answered the follow-up question I had, which was, if you were looking to partner with somebody and they didn't have an interest in joining any of these committees, would that be viewed as a negative? Is there like a certain type of profile of individual or practice that is more entrepreneurial with somebody that wants to be more involved in the business? But you guys have both, and that works well for how you all are structured.
Yeah, when we talk on the business development side, when we have that very first phone call or Zoom meeting, I always like to say, I hope that there's three things that we're going to get across as a team. Number one, and this is the most important one, we want to partner with the most passionate oral surgeons in the space. It doesn't mean that you have to be passionate about business. You don't have to be passionate about QAPI, but we need there to be passion and joy in what you do day in and day out. And as long as that criteria is met, then there's probably going to be a good opportunity to work together. And then from there, we go to number 2 and number 3. Number 2, we're going to teach you about the world of private equity so that you become the private equity firm. And by doing that, we're going to create more economic opportunity than any other platform, any other group would ever be able to provide. And it's because we're that rarity of the combination of a business leadership team that has also been inside of middle market private equity firms. So we know exactly how those private equity firms like to think.
What year did you say that you founded Allied OMS again? Was it 2020?
We started Allied OMS. We did our first presentation on April 1st, 2020, which was a remarkable time given that we were all locked in our rooms on Zoom, not wondering how long we were going to be in there.
That's right. That had to be a little bit unnerving with so much uncertainty of the future at that point. So April 2020. So you're a little over 4 years now. You had mentioned, I think you said 30-ish practices representing almost 40 locations. When you're looking forward now to the next 5 years, so you've kind of built this foundational organization. Sounds like you're doing a lot of really unique things. I love all the committees. I love the approach that you guys have, your core values. As you're looking forward, what sort of plans do you have? What's going to be different the next 4 years for you all?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I learned in the private equity firm that I worked in for almost 14 years was really on building great corporate cultures and human capital development. And so when we started this, it was 4 oral surgeons and Ryan and I, just 2 business folks. And we've now built a team of over 31 employees at the corporate level. And so I think over the next 4 to 5 years, I see a path and the board sees a path of being able to triple or quadruple the size of our business. So really focusing in on continuing to invest in that culture, making sure that we're training people about what we stand for. And kind of like you described earlier, one of the mantras that we believe in, and it sounds a little bit harsh, but it's to fire fast. So if we make a hiring decision that's not the right fit for our organization, we need to be able to move on quickly. And what I love is even when we've made some of those decisions, every one of those people that has left our organization has gone on to have another career somewhere else. And so it's meant to be, look, we're not for everybody. We are high growth. I frequently say uncomfortable should be your new comfortable because we change so much, right? The business is growing fast. The world changes quickly, and we have to be able to adapt and change with it. And agility is probably one of our core competencies that we have to be comfortable with. But I see this amazing path of being able to continue to grow and hopefully triple or quadruple in size and continue to be a great service provider to our doctors. We like to say, if we take great care of our doctors, then our doctors can take great care of our patients. And I don't even have to think about the economic side. I don't have to worry about the key performance indicators. I don't have to be maniacally focused on every last penny. I just have to make sure that we provide a great environment for our surgeon partners.
Yeah, that happens almost by default at that point. Obviously, metrics are important, but if you're focusing on those right things, you're a long ways towards where you need to be at that point, for sure. I'm curious, when you look at the industry as a whole, there's a lot of estimates that are out there, a lot of market studies that get done, and the consolidation of dental is a real thing. It's happening quickly. There's some estimates that within the next 5-10 years, it'll be almost 75% of dental offices associated with a DSO. On the OMS side, it's a smaller sliver of that larger landscape. I'd be curious your perspective. I've heard different things between 3,000 and 5,000 practices. Do you view as a percentage to consolidation there being more blue ocean in OMS right now than there is in the broader dental landscape?
We think so. Based on our research, we think that the market is somewhere between maybe 10 and 12% affiliated with an existing PE-backed group. One of our favorite growth levers, and this is a differentiator for us at Allied OMS, one of our biggest growth differentiators is our ability to help a surgeon start their own practice and make it part of Allied OMS. So I think what's different is you don't have to be an existing practice. You don't necessarily have to be somebody that's been in business for 10 or 15 years. Matter of fact, last night I was on the phone with 2 oral surgeons and we were talking about some ideas on how to open multiple locations together. This is somebody that's been practicing for 8 years. They've had the entrepreneurial bug. They started a family that just didn't quite work out. And now they're finally ready to take the plunge. We have the ability and the flexibility to make that a reality for our doctor partners. So I would envision that not only will we continue to look at existing practice partnerships, but we'll also have a significant opportunity to open up satellite locations, right? Significantly sized satellites in those existing 12 states where we currently operate.
That's actually really interesting. Do you foresee an opportunity for oral surgeons recently out of school to have a path there to ownership or creating a new practice or location? Or is this more within existing practices that are looking to expand into new locations, but you already have an existing relationship with the doctor prior to opening it?
I love it because the answer is all of the above. And I think what it starts, though, with is transparent, clear communication. What are your goals over the next 3 to 5 years? And how can we help you think about the decision-making process of where to join? I think something that we get, kudos for when we do resident dinners is we don't come in and talk about the Allied OMS commercial. We don't lead with practices that are looking to hire. We actually have one of our existing doctor partners, typically a recent grad, come in and talk about the things that you should have learned in dental school and medical school that nobody ever taught you. So we talk about how to par and depar with commercial plans. We talk about the difference between gross production and net production and collections rates and key performance indicators. All of these things that young doctors are probably dying to know about. And so by the time we get them sort of all excited about, student loan consolidation, that's one of my favorite topics. Teaching them about there's some really cool ways of consolidating and even refinancing student loans. So by the time we're sort of 2/3 of the way through a resident dinner, somebody will invariably raise their hand and say, I'm interested, like, where are you guys hiring? And it's like, oh my gosh, I'm glad. Let's flip to the next slide because here's where we have openings now, a year from now, and 2 years from now. So with that open, clear, goal-setting methodology, we can say, hey, do you want to get some years under your belt? And then we can talk about how to help you open your own practice, yes or no, kind of decision tree analysis. Based on that answer, right, we may need to backfill that location and help them open a satellite, or maybe they just want to go work in a multi-doctor location and that's what they want to do. There are some wildly entrepreneurial folks. There is a guy that we met at a resident dinner who already owns a practice. It was in his family. And so he said it has a family member that's waiting to pass the torch. And while he's finishing up his residency program, he's got another couple that are under letter of intent. So love the doctors that have that growth mindset, that have that entrepreneurial flair. That's the stuff that gets us really excited. And so I think that's kind of the most unique aspect of Allied. Whether you want to show up to work and do surgeries, or whether you want to do that and then eventually open your own practice, or whether you're undecided, maybe you just want to revisit the conversation in a couple years. It's just having that dialogue to teach them about all of the different opportunities that are in front of them.
The flexibility to manage through the variety of situations that you just described is really great. And I really appreciate, and you've mentioned it multiple times in this conversation, the focus on education and the importance of education, the business elements and many of the things, what you didn't learn in dental school is a great way of thinking about it. There's so much to teach. How do you think about continuing education and kind of creating a culture of continual education? Because I would imagine it's not a one-time, let me sit you down, I'm going to explain all these things, and now you're a master of EBITDA. You understand how debt functions. It seems like it's such dense material. How do you ensure that over time you continue to add that value?
We think one of the best ways is to have intellectual curiosity as a cornerstone of our culture, not just in the organization on the MSO side, but within our doctor community. So we want people that see something in the world and say, I wonder why that is. And if you have that intellectual curiosity, that spark to ask a question, then it just naturally leads to getting answers and asking more questions and so on and so forth. So that's what we really seek to find. And then you have to be able to break it down into bite-sized chunks. So, I can't tell you how many revisions we made to our debt primer. We had a bunch of MBAs kind of take a stab at it. And I'm like, you're speaking a different language. Like these doctors don't necessarily know. We joke, we call them TLAs, 3-letter acronyms. You've got all of these foreign terms, like break it into small bite-sized chunks let's host a presentation, let's record it so the doctors can see it multiple times, and then let's share it. And so I think it's also building a repertoire, sort of an inventory of modules that the doctors can consume at their leisure. But then also, again, as some of them say, EBITDA, like you taught me what that is, that's enough. I don't want any more. Or others that say, hey, can I go to an investment banking conference? You talked about speaking at, for instance, the Kane Brothers Healthcare Conference. Could I come and hear you speak? And it's like, oh my gosh, like you want to live in the ecosystem of healthcare transactions, go to an investment banking healthcare conference. That is where it all takes place.
How do you structure the communication cadence within your organization to ensure that people stay updated on what's new? I know you have different committees, and I'm sure that they have their own kind of meeting cadence, but you talk me through, like, maybe from your viewpoint as CEO, how you keep your executive leadership team and your support organization kind of in the know, what that looks like, and then how you ensure that you retain alignment throughout your organization as you grow and scale.
Yeah, it's probably one of the more complicated aspects of my job in particular. I kind of joke, like I could play golf, all day long on the weekdays, but boy, if I'm not available between 6 and 8 in the morning and 6 and 8 at night, 7 days a week, like we got a problem. So it starts with a robust communication. I learned this from a CEO mentor that I used to work with. So it starts with monthly emails. Matter of fact, I was drafting my monthly email today because with the Dow futures opening rather negative, and it turned out to be a pretty ugly day, our doctors just want to know, like, hey, what do you think about this? How does this impact our business? What are the things that we should be, keeping a watchful eye on? So it's monthly notes to all of our doctor shareholders. And then when it's sort of like less of the busy season, I'll also host about once every other month or maybe once a quarter, we'll do an all shareholder Zoom meeting. And I think I probably scared our doctor co-founders and a lot of my management team. They said, well, what's the format, right? It's going to be webinars, so nobody can talk, right? And I said, no, it's going to be an open Zoom. Like I lived in the world of private equity, and I'll tell you what, like you develop some thick skin. You develop the ability to answer on the fly. And also, if you don't know the answer, you develop a habit of knowing when you need to say, that's a good question. I need to get back to you on that because I don't have an answer right now. So I would host these meetings, and we've had now probably about a dozen of them. And I just love it because you can feel, if there ever is pressure inside the organization, you can feel the pressure relief valve collectively being relieved from the room after we have these meetings. And it's fun because some of the doctors will actually speak up on my behalf. They'll say, wait a second, Dan already talked about this. Remember, it was this and that. And so the fact that our doctors can sometimes even teach some of the comments or components to our other doctors, that to me is victory. Like I often joke, if we're in dinner and we always have a doctor present when we're talking to a new partner, but if that new partner wants to ask a business question to myself or to our chief development officer, Brian Hamilton, and one of our doctors jumps in and answers the question, we've succeeded, right? I actually view that as an immense positive once we've taught that. So our goal is to try to get the doctors that want to get to that point up to that level so that they can sit in a business development meeting and answer the business questions.
Now, this is a little bit of a tactical question, maybe a little bit in the weeds, but related to the all hands. Do you solicit questions ahead of time, or do you just ask folks to come with their questions? And do you feel that there's pros and cons to either approach?
Yeah, this is the part that gave everybody heartburn. I said, I'm not going to solicit questions in advance. Like it's an open forum. However, I do need some rules of decorum. So if you're going to ask a question, I would ask that if you're okay with me sharing it with everybody, you put it in the group chat. If you don't want name attribution, I ask that you direct message me. Or if you're uncomfortable with that, shoot me a text or shoot me an email. So throughout the course of the meeting, I'll actually have doctors say, hey Dan, Dr. So-and-so here, he's got a question too. Make sure you get to that one. But it's one of those three ways. And I think otherwise everybody stays on mute, right? This is not like raise your hand and ask it out loud. It's just send the questions and I'm going to answer them in the sequence in which they're asked. And I think now that we've done that a bunch, it's, the first time we did it, it was a 1 hour scheduled meeting that went 3.5 hours because there were so many questions. But we've done it enough now that some of the doctors are like, hey, I'm on vacation. Do you mind if I just listen in? Because I don't really have anything to add, and I'm just kind of curious. That's a good event too. So just a good way to keep everybody up to date. And then on top of that, once a year, we do an annual shareholders meeting where we get everybody off site. It's an opportunity to bring in expert speakers, perhaps folks that provide CE, and just the camaraderie and collaboration that we see when everybody gets together. It's just, I don't know of any better way to invest capital than to see that happen. So this coming February will be our third annual shareholder meeting. We didn't do it in the first year. It was still COVID, but we started hearing about other people doing it, and we love that idea. And we solicit our doctors' opinions on, who do you want to speak and what topics would you like to hear about? So that is definitely one of our capstone events.
And what does that look like? Is it a one full day? Is it a particular destination? How do you have it structured?
Yeah, we typically make it a destination, and ideally it's a Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Fridays tend to be lighter days. I like to joke the doctors are very valuable when they're chairside, and so it means that our team has to give up weekends, if you want to be on the management team. But it also is an opportunity. We've invited spouses. We've also started to extend it. We've got some doctors that have young families, and so we know that this can't be disruptive to their family lives as well. So we've tried to make some events where we can include the families. We can actually have some programming that's specifically garnered, or pick a location that has some fun kids clubs or kids activities. And so that's typically the format. So kind of a welcome dinner on a Friday, a full day of programming, or kind of 2/3 of a day of programming on Saturday. And then, kind of Sunday morning as folks are ready to leave for the airport, maybe just a little bit of a get together from a breakfast perspective and a speaker perspective. And then everybody can break and go back to their, back to their 9 to 5s.
You mentioned earlier about you're sending your monthly newsletter out, and a lot of people are curious. Today we're recording this in the beginning of August. It was obviously a very poor day for the markets. In general, there's been, I think, significantly more discussion about a potential recession. It's interesting because over the past couple of years, there was like the most highly anticipated recession ever that didn't actually come to fruition during the time frame that it was kind of presented that it would happen at. But I think that now we're kind of entering a phase where there's a little more chatter about it. There's a little bit less certainty about what the future holds. How do you think about the business in general as it relates to being recession resistant? And separate and apart from pulling out your crystal ball and predicting anything, kind of what are the things that you think about as you kind of enter the next 3-6 months? Anything in particular that is important to either shore up or communicate just to create comfort within the organization?
Yeah, one of the mantras we talk about is unlike fine wines, bad news does not age with time. And if it's something that you know about and you don't share with anybody else, then it's your problem. But if you can share it with just literally anybody else on our team, then it's our problem. And so it starts and ends with open, honest dialogue, even when the news can sometimes be crummy. So I talk to our doctors. Ryan talks to our doctors all the time. And I ask for instance, I had 4 conversations over the weekend, and I said, hey, something we're hearing about is treatment plan elongation or postponement. So let's say that you had an extraction, and normally you'd have an implant placed within a specific period of time. Does it feel like that's gotten elongated or postponed at all? And all 4 of the doctors I talked to said, it's interesting. Like, consult volumes are still very steady. If anything, maybe even higher. The extractions are still pretty strong. And you're right. Like, the implant timing, people aren't comfortable setting up that follow-up appointment, or aren't comfortable talking about, well, let's wait and see if that's the path I want to go down. So with open and honest dialogue, it lets us make sure that we can read the tea leaves, hopefully a little bit faster. And then on top of that, I like to say we're building a business. We call it kind of an all seasons approach, but we're building a business that we would want to own forever, even if we have outside investors. And so we're not doing any sort of moonshots. We're not swinging as hard as we can at every single pitch that comes down the plate. We're trying to make sure that we have contingency plans. I was talking to somebody earlier today, and I said, look, it's a little morose, but there's a key man life insurance policy for some of our senior management team members. And the amount, and I talked about it specifically, the amount is to make sure that the business doesn't miss a beat. If I get hit by a bus, this business has the contingency plan for how to hire an interim CEO, 3 search firms to talk to, what it would cost to hire a great person. And so the business wouldn't miss a beat. And it was sort of an uncomfortable conversation, but one that we felt that we had to have. And we had it 3 years ago when we were still tiny. So the idea is, let's think 3 years down the road. What do we aspire to look like? And then let's reverse engineer. What are the decisions? What are the contingencies that we should develop now, codify? So actually put pen to paper, which I don't love doing, but my team forces me to do, and then sit it on the shelf. Because what's been fun is from time to time, we actually do predict the future, maybe not from a timing perspective, but we predict what eventually happens. And so then you have the opportunity to say, we already talked about this. Actually, let's break out this contingency plan of what if interest rates go higher or what if they go lower? What are we going to do and how quickly are we going to do it? And then we even share some of those plans with our key partners. So we have this amazing group of 4 commercial banks, and we talk on a monthly basis, right? We have quarterly compliance certificates, but we talk on a monthly basis. Hey, what are you hearing? What are you seeing in the market? Because they've got DSOs that are part of their book of business. And so it's just that constant ask questions, phone a friend. I like to say, just have a quick conversation and, ask a question and sit back and let somebody, share what they're seeing in the market. Take notes. I share it with the whole team. So there's an opportunity to just constantly keep your finger on the pulse of the market.
Yeah, it ties to that intellectually curious statement that you had made earlier. And, you said a few other things that I think were interesting. You talked about some of the conversations you had with MB2. You also mentioned a CEO mentor that you had at some point. What is your personal kind of professional growth trajectory? How are you making sure that, you're always best equipped to serve those that you've partnered with? And how do you think about that?
Yeah, the fun thing about private equity is it tends to be a natural talent magnet. And so I have frequently in my career, anytime I'm talking to an investment banker, a lender, even competitive private equity firms, I'm like, hey, anybody on the beach or anybody that you think is like particularly interesting that is open to a conversation. And I've just latched onto those folks. Matter of fact, we just added Greg Scott to our board of directors. Greg runs a group of retired, typically public company healthcare executives. And so it's just this amazing roster of a who's who of former executives. And Greg's been a friend and mentor for years. Ironically, Allied OMS was too small initially for him to join the board, but it finally got to the size and scale where Greg can really be impactful. So it's always having folks that have been there, that have done that. Greg has run multi-billion-dollar organizations. I haven't. And so I aspire to get us to that point. So how can I talk to, befriend, get mentored by those people that have already gone through that trajectory? And there's so much knowledge that you can learn from surrounding yourself with those types of individuals.
So you'd say human connection, networking is probably the highest priority and gives you the best opportunity to continue to learn and to grow.
And fearlessness, because I've called on some people that I have no business calling. And, what's the worst? They hang up on you or they say no. But more often than not, I think they crave that interaction as well. They like to share the stories, right? If you've gone through some of these things, it's fun to relive some of those moments when you're on the battlefield.
Absolutely. If somebody was going to seek you out for mentorship, what could they say that would attract your attention or help you understand that the time that you spent would be worthwhile?
Ooh, that's a really good question. I love entrepreneurs. I love people that think differently, that are trying to do something different, but that are also solving a real problem. So I think once you've kind of passed that filter, then one of the questions is, hey, this is where I'd like to be in the next 3 to 5 years. Do you have any stories that you might be able to share that were part of your journey that I might be able to, kind of reinterpret for the things that I might encounter? I think storytelling is one of the lost arts. And so if somebody can tell me a good story, I'm immediately intrigued, right? If they can tap into the passion that they have in a particular space, and if it ignites a similar passion for work that I've done, tends to be a good way to get that ball rolling. And many of the team that I've worked with, Sarah's a great example. Sarah and I used to work together in private equity 10 plus years ago, lost a little bit of touch and then reconnected when she said, I miss private equity. I want to be back in the frying pan. And I said, gosh, I can't even afford what you're worth, but if you'd be interested in joining me on this crazy trip, like I think there could be an amazing opportunity to work together. And so I've had a number of people call them kind of the stars in my constellations that have come back from prior lives. And there's opportunities to, kind of get back on the field together. So I think those are kind of fun ways of being able to do it as well. And watching them grow. To me, maybe as I get older, the development of my team is probably the most important role that I fulfill as a CEO. I sort of joke, like, I don't really know what my job is. I think my job is to bring out the best in the people that are on the team and that join the team, and to get them to accomplish things that they think are impossible. That's actually my favorite thing. If somebody says, well, I'm not sure that can be done, or nobody's ever done it before, and I'm like, oh, that's music to my ears.
That's great. I want to be conscious of time, so we'll wrap up here in just a second. Last question for you. As you look towards the next 12 months, what's something that you're most excited about?
Ooh, that is a good question. It's probably the recruiting side of new surgeons. 3 years ago, we kind of had our first resident dinner, and it was actually just at a demand from one of our doctors. They said, I've been doing these for years. You should come out and listen to what I do. And we sent a team of people out there, and I was like, oh my gosh, like the opportunity to start to share the story of private equity in medical school, to me, is just an amazing opportunity. So I think one of the things that I like to do more, I'd like to get an opportunity to, teach a 1-hour credit class, to teach something at a medical school campus about the business of healthcare, because I don't think anybody's really doing that. And to do that through the lens of private equity, regardless of the path that anybody is going on, whether it's academia, private practice, large group practice, I just think there's so much to share. So I love that as my team gets bigger, there's an opportunity for me to be able to share more of that directly with people that are just starting their career. So I've been fortunate enough to do it in business school through the form of occasionally guest lecturing at Kellogg and other schools. But being able to do that at the medical school level, to me, would be something I would really look forward to in the next 12 months.
Dan, thank you so much. You clearly have a lot of passion for what you guys have created at Allied. You're looking at things in a really unique way. And I just really enjoyed the conversation. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Mike.
The Dental Economist Show is brought to you by Planet DDS. To find out more about how cloud-based dental software by Planet DDS helps unleash dentists and their staff to focus on patient care, visit www.planetdds.com. Stay tuned for upcoming episodes by following wherever you listen to podcasts. Thanks for listening.